Okay, let's dive into this. Mathematics. It often feels like the purest thing, right? Just logic, numbers, proofs, stuff that's either right or wrong.
Definitely. No messy human stuff, supposedly.
Exactly. But then, you look around, math is everywhere. Financial models, AI sorting your feeds,
It's deeply embedded.
and suddenly this super abstract field has, well, really concrete effects on people's lives.
Which raises a question maybe you weren't expecting.
Does ethics even belong in a conversation about math?
Yeah, it's that contrast that's so striking. We love the elegance, the certainty,
Mhm.
but its power, its role in, everything from building bridges to tracking diseases,
Yeah.
it forces the issue.
So do mathematicians actually have a responsibility for how their work gets used?
That's really the heart of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
When math has that much influence.
Does that create like an ethical duty?
Exactly. We've been digging into quite a bit of research on this, and
Mhm.
honestly,
Yeah.
there are moments where it just clicks. You see how these, pure ideas actually impact real people.
So our mission today is to really get a handle on that. Look past the theorems, past the proofs.
And into the real-world consequences. Try to understand those ethical angles.
Right, because math isn't just happening in a vacuum, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Think about it. Its findings are often critical. Sometimes indirectly, sure, but critical.
In fields like medicine, engineering,
Yeah.
places with really clear ethical rules.
Precisely. Doctors have to weigh the ethics of treatments. Engineers prioritize safety.
So the argument is because math has such a big impact, mathematicians need similar ethical thinking.
It suggests a parallel. Definitely. It's a compelling point.
It is. And, the Wikipedia page on math ethics actually says mathematicians have a professional duty
Oh, really? What does it say?
to support ethical use, protect society from bad applications. It's pretty direct.
Wow. Yeah.
But then you've got someone like G.H. Hardy, famous mathematician.
Right. The pure mathematician.
He basically said real math is almost wholly useless. And that was a good thing.
He saw its detachment as a virtue.
Yeah, kept it gentle and clean, away from, causing harm. It's a nice image. Math is this pristine intellectual thing.
But did that view really hold up now, given how woven into everything math has become?
That's the question, isn't it?
While that idea of ethically neutral pure math is surveys and studies within the math world, they paint a different picture.
How so?
Many mathematicians do feel ethically bound, even doing abstract stuff.
Really? Like how?
Well, there's a baseline expectation, right? Be honest, correct your mistakes.
Standard academic integrity stuff.
Sure, but also disclosing potential impacts on public health, safety, welfare. It goes beyond just the proof being right.
It's about awareness of potential consequences.
Exactly. A broader view.
And that awareness feels even more vital when you think about all the automation happening, driven by math.
Oh, absolutely. Whitehead's point about civilization advancing by automating things, it hits home here.
Because we rely on so much mathematical output without even thinking. Social media ranks, credit scores.
Police strategies even. But what if that automation has, hidden biases or just goes wrong?
Yeah, what then?
Well, a review back in 2022 pointed this out. The ethical thinking in the math community may be lagging behind the influence of these algorithms. And thinkers like Rubin Hirsch argued that even if a specific theorem seems value-free,
Mathematicians still have duties.
as citizens, teachers, colleagues, yeah, just like other quantitative fields, engineers, statisticians, they have ethics codes.
So it boils down to a kind of duty of care.
I think so. Accuracy, responsibility, being clear about what you're doing and its limits, transparency.
Okay, so if a mathematician's work is used harmfully, when are they actually responsible? That seems incredibly tricky.
It is complex. Several things matter, like foreseeability.
Foreseeability, could they have reasonably guessed it might be used badly?
Exactly. So if you're building image recognition tech today, you probably know about potential bias if your training data isn't diverse.
Right. Ignoring that seems problematic.
It could make you partly responsible for unfair results. But contrast that with, say, number theory from decades ago.
Which was super abstract.
Totally. And then, bam, it becomes the basis for modern cryptography, for secure websites.
You wouldn't blame the original number theorist for unforeseen good uses or potential bad ones they couldn't imagine?
Generally, no. The connection is too remote, too unpredictable back then.
Okay, that makes sense. What about intent? Do they mean for harm to happen?
Intent's crucial. You can look at it through different ethical lenses. Utilitarianism asks about the overall consequences, more good or more harm.
So designing an algorithm specifically to help track dissidents, that's clearly bad intent, bad outcome.
Big responsibility there from a utilitarian view.
Yeah.
Then there's Kantian ethics, focusing more on the principles, the motives.
Like, was it done deceptively? Could everyone act on that same principle without chaos?
Right. Honesty, respecting people as ends in themselves, not just means.
What if there's no bad intent, just ignorance? They didn't realize the potential harm.
That gets into neglect or negligence. Just saying I didn't know isn't always a free pass.
If the application is pretty standard or obvious.
Yeah. If you create, say, a disease risk model, but totally ignore obvious patient privacy issues, that's an ethical lapse.
It's failing to do due diligence.
Kind of. And there's this related idea of moral luck.
Moral luck.
Yeah, like if your theorem gets misused in some completely bizarre way you couldn't possibly predict, you're less culpable.
Then if you actively helped with the misuse, knowing what it was for.
Exactly. Active contribution versus unforeseen repurposing.
So, okay, summarizing the responsibility factors. How predictable was it? How involved were they? What was their intent, their transparency? Did they follow professional norms? Did they try to limit harm?
That's a pretty good checklist. And speaking of questionable stuff, sometimes the problems are within the research process itself, like data dredging.
Ah, right. Data dredging. Can you explain that a bit for listeners?
Sure. It's also called p-hacking, or sometimes arcing hypothesizing after results are known.
Catchy name.
Basically, it's misusing statistics. Instead of starting with a hypothesis and testing it.
You go fishing in your data.
Exactly. You run tons of tests, slice the data every which way until you find something that looks statistically significant.
Even if it's probably just random chance.
Precisely. Then you only report that significant finding, maybe acting like it was your original hypothesis all along.
And that can lead to totally bogus results, right?
Oh, easily. If you run enough tests, you'll find apparent correlations just by chance. Think about a drug company testing a new pill.
Against like 50 different health outcomes.
Yeah, and maybe it shows a tiny positive effect on one obscure measure and no effect or even bad effects on the other 49.
But they only trumpet the one positive.
That's the danger. Or those nutrition studies that seem to flip-flop constantly.
Coffee is good. No, wait, bad. Now good again.
A lot of that can be due to this kind of flexible analysis, looking for any statistically convenient result. By the way, the P in p-hacking refers to the p-value.
The probability measure.
Right, the probability of seeing your results if nothing real was going on. Scientists usually want a low p-value, like below 0.05, to claim significance. Dredging helps you find those low p-values, legitimately or not.
And it can create really weird, spurious correlations too, yeah.
Definitely. The famous example is the strong statistical correlation between Nicolas Cage movies released per year and swimming pool drownings.
Which is obviously nonsense.
Utterly meaningless. But data dredging can make it look real statistically. Experts see this as a huge problem.
Bordering on fraud sometimes?
Some classify it that way, yeah, because you're forcing a result. And these results often vanish when others try to replicate the study. They were just noise.
And the real damage is it kills trust.
It totally undermines trust in science, in statistics. It exploits the public's belief that numbers don't lie.
Which is why stats education now really hammers things like pre-registering hypotheses, adjusting for multiple tests, replication.
Exactly, trying to build safeguards against it.
It really shows how math tools, meant for discovery, can get twisted into tools for persuasion, especially if your audience isn't stat savvy.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Kathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction.
Right. Powerful metaphor.
She points to things like biased social media algorithms pushing harmful stuff, or credit scoring models that bake in discrimination.
Or AI in policing that reinforces existing biases.
Yeah, and her key point is often, it's not the math itself that's inherently evil.
It's the human choices around it.
The data we feed it, how we design it, how we decide what success even looks like for the algorithm, how we use the output, those are human ethical decisions.
Which loops us back towards that earlier point about responsibility. But what about the other end of the spectrum? Pure research, math that seems totally disconnected from application.
Ah, yes. The ethics of pure math. Is it okay to spend time and resources on stuff that seems, well, useless?
Hardy again, he was the big defender of that, right? Its intrinsic value.
He was. Believed pure math was valuable just for its beauty, its truth, totally separate from any practical use.
He literally said you couldn't justify a mathematician's life by its usefulness.
Famously so. And he liked that it was useless. Kept it gentle and clean, remember? Pursuing truth and beauty was almost like a moral good in itself for him.
The utilitarian view, that questions it, right?
Definitely. From a utilitarian angle, you ask, is funding super abstract number theory the best use of resources when people are starving or sick? It's a cost-benefit calculation.
It's a tough question.
It is. But history throws a curveball here.
How so?
So much useless math turned out to be incredibly useful later. Number theory, the ultimate pure math for Hardy, is now the backbone of internet security, RSA encryption.
Wow. Okay.
Algebraic geometry, another super abstract field. Crucial for coding theory, sending data reliably, even in theoretical physics.
You just can't predict what might be useful down the line.
Exactly. Cut off pure research because it looks useless now, and you might be cutting off the foundation for future breakthroughs.
Plus, there's the philosophical argument, right? Just knowing more, understanding the universe, has value in itself.
That's a strong counterpoint, maybe a Kantian view. We have a duty to develop our rational side, and practically, today's abstraction could be tomorrow's key tool.
So it's a balancing act, especially with public funding.
It seems like it. You need to support immediate needs, solve current problems, but you also need space for that curiosity-driven exploration.
Maybe encourage both. Fundamental work in connecting mathematicians with applied problems.
That sounds like a reasonable middle ground. It's interesting, even Hardy admitted his own work made no difference to the world's comfort.
But he used its existence to justify his own peaceful life dedicated to it.
Right, so justifying pure research depends on your lens. Utilitarian cost-benefit versus, say, a duty to seek truth.
But both sides would probably agree on basic research ethics, honesty, rigor.
Absolutely, and being aware that even pure math might find applications eventually.
Okay, so we've talked about responsibility, questionable practices, pure research. How do mathematical judgments themselves compare to ethical ones? Are they the same kind of truth?
That's a really important distinction. Mathematical judgments rest on deductive proof.
Start with axioms, follow the logic, reach a conclusion.
Exactly. If the proof is sound within that system, the theorem is considered true. The evidence is internal consistency.
Okay. And ethical judgments?
They're different, usually normative about what should be and often empirical, based on observing well-being, consequences, societal values, plus moral reasoning.
So math is logical chains. Ethics is weighing values and outcomes.
Broadly, yes, though neither is perfectly simple. Math proofs can be incredibly complex. Flaws can hide for years.
Like the four-color theorem, the computer-assisted proof caused debate.
Right. What even counts as a proof got questioned. And ethics, you almost never get that mathematical certainty.
You can't prove an action is morally right like you prove Pythagoras' theorem.
You build a reasoned case using ethical principles, evidence of impact, but there's often room for disagreement.
It's interesting, though. Both fields use things that test their limits, like counterexamples in math that break a theory.
And thought experiments in ethics, like the trolley problem.
Yeah, they push our intuitions, force us to examine the foundations.
True. And the foundations themselves differ. Math axioms are often agreed upon by convention, ethical principles, constantly debated, drawing on human experience.
But the lines can blur sometimes in applied math.
Definitely. Think about statistics, epidemiology. They use empirical data, build models with uncertainty built in.
And the reliability of those models, say, for climate change has huge ethical weight.
Absolutely critical. And conversely, math gives tools to ethics. Game theory, decision theory help analyze moral dilemmas.
So summing it up, math claims need proof, ethical claims need moral reasoning. Both can be wrong.
That's a good way to put it. Math often feels more certain, but ethics has to handle ambiguity, which means mathematicians need some humility when wading into ethical waters.
All of which leads, naturally, to what about professional ethics? Should mathematicians have formal codes like doctors or engineers?
It's a growing discussion. The argument for it is strong.
Because mathematicians know their own field best.
Exactly. They understand the subtleties of models, authorship norms, data privacy implications in analysis. They're best placed to spot the relevant ethical issues.
And are we seeing moves in that direction?
We are, yeah. The European Mathematical Society has a code of ethics now, integrity, respect, things like that.
And the American Mathematical Society.
They have guidelines, too, on plagiarism, bias, teaching responsibility. So, yes, important first steps from within the community.
But is it enough just to look inwards? Should they learn from other professions?
That's the counter-argument, or maybe a complementary one. A recent analysis suggests looking at engineering, accountancy, law could be really valuable.
Why them specifically?
Their relationship with the public is different, often more direct. involving things like safety standards, financial trust, legal duties. Engineering codes have detailed stuff on safety, liability.
Things a pure mathematician might not think about immediately.
Right. So collaborating with ethicists, sociologists, tech experts could make a math-specific code much stronger, more aware of broader impacts.
So the recommendation is math society should lead, but consult widely.
Pretty much. Develop an international code, maybe, that really puts public interest first, and maybe even differentiates between pure and applied math ethics where needed.
It does feel like math has been a bit slower on this compared to, say, medicine.
Historically, yes. There wasn't that tradition of formal oaths or heavy self-regulation like the Hippocratic Oath. Most guidelines were more about academic conduct, not broad societal ethics.
But things are changing. Why now?
Several factors. Growing awareness of algorithmic bias is huge. Data privacy concerns. The rise of AI ethics is a major field.
More interdisciplinary work.
That too. And society's forming dedicated ethics committees. There's definitely more momentum now.
So what's the best path forward? How to actually build these codes effectively?
A hybrid approach seems smartest. Mathematicians draft the core, using their expertise.
Then
Bring in the outsiders, ethicists, industry folks, maybe even people from communities directly affected by algorithms or data analysis. Get their input, identify blind spots.
I like how the ACM code for computer science was developed.
That's often cited as a good model, yes. Collaborative and iterative.
And just having a code isn't enough, right? It needs teeth.
Absolutely. The recommendation is often to include complete procedures, ways to actually enforce the code, like engineering accreditation boards, shows it's serious, builds public trust, self-regulation for the public good.
Okay, so bringing this all home, the connection between math and ethics, it's way more complex than it first looks.
Definitely not just clean, abstract logic. The sheer power and impact of math create real responsibilities.
Yeah, especially now. Algorithms are, kind of running our lives in many ways.
Which means mathematicians really need to think about consequences. Be honest. Be transparent.
And it connects back to those big philosophical ideas we touched on. Utilitarianism, does the work help more than harm? Kantianism, acting with integrity, respecting people.
Exactly. Both tie into evidence and justification, but reminding us that math proof isn't the same as moral reasoning based on human values and impact.
So mathematicians aren't just off in an ivory tower, they're part of society.
Precisely. And these emerging ethics codes, they're a sign of the field maturing, acknowledging that social role.
And the call is for them to lead in setting standards for their field.
But doing it with the rest of society, for the public good, like other professions have learned to do.
So a final thought for you, the listener. Think about the math tools you use daily. Your phone's algorithms, new statistics.
Consider the ethical choices baked into how they were made, how they're used.
It really makes you appreciate the human side of these seemingly objective systems.